Well, we're progressing very well in our course on New Testament Greek. You may be watching this as a second semester student, or you may be reviewing this video as a third semester student. Either way, we are progressing right along, and we're coming now to the subjunctive mood. As you may recall, we looked in the last chapter at the infinitive, and we said that Greek has more than one mood, mood being a grammatical term, not talking about whether you are very happy today or udas, sad. It is not about your personal mood. It is about the style of speech in New Testament Greek. Indicative is the mood of statements, of facts, of questions, of simply sharing information generally. There's more to it than that, but most of the verb forms we have had and indeed are in the New Testament are in the indicative mood. But there are others, and we need to know them. One we talked about in chapter 15 is the infinitive, and that brought us to our second mood. We've only had two thus far, and today we start the third one. We call it the subjunctive. In English, sometimes it's been called the conjunctive, but in Greek we refer to it as the subjunctive, and I think I'm hearing more and more in English the word subjunctive describing this mood. It is the mood of possibility. So, indicative, I basically state facts, ask questions. Infinitives are used to complete verb expressions. For example, I am able to hit. Because they don't have subjects, usually, with one exception, the accusative of subject with the infinitive. But generally, they don't have subjects. They've gotten the name infinitives: to see, to go, to stay. And you'll remember in Greek, the difference between the present and the aorist infinitive is actually a difficult one to define because it doesn't have to do with tense. To have gone, well, yes, that could be a perfect infinitive, but to see and to see could be expressed in Greek either in the aorist tense or in the present tense. The difference would probably be that the present tense was more ongoing process, or at least inside the action taking place, whereas the aorist tense would tend to describe the action from more of a distance as a whole. The subjunctive mood is expressing probability or purpose, we'll find. I could hit John if I get angry enough. I could hit John if I were angry, but I'm not. I would hit John if he were not so small and I were so big. You see, in each case, we express it in English with could, would, might. Those are typical expressions of the way we have to translate the subjunctive mood into English. But first, we need to learn what it looks like in Greek. We also have, by the way, the optative mood, but in Koine Greek, in the period we are studying of the New Testament, the optative was on its way out in use, and the subjunctive was taking over its function. We will get to the imperative, which we use for giving orders, and one more that is a huge importance that we cannot avoid, and that is participles, which are a combination of verbs and nouns. So let's look at the subjunctive mood, the one that expresses probability and possibility. Before we jump right into the forms, something important, again, to emphasize the augment, epsilon or eta usually, is only used in the indicative. It is not used in the subjunctive. The augment or prefix, this prefix, which we call the augment, there's another one we call reduplication in the perfect tense, but this one used in the aorist tense shows past time when it's in the indicative. There may be some exceptions to that, but that's the general rule. But in the subjunctive mood, we will not have an augment, and therefore, you have to get used to this. Therefore, the subjunctive, the aorist subjunctive, does not express necessarily past time, unless the context makes it plain that it took place in the past. Context is queen, as I like to say. Jesus is king. The scriptures are about Jesus, but context is queen. Hugely important to decide the meaning of any expression. The subjunctive mood, we will not see augments. So let's look at these that are described for us in chapter 16 of the textbook. And you'll notice that very welcomely, I guess that's an adverb, to welcome. Anyway, we welcome these endings because we can use them in many different tenses. We just have to learn that the subjunctive mood endings generally simply lengthen the first vowel. For example, luo, well, there's only one vowel to lengthen, so it stays omega. But ace, epsilon iota becomes eta with an iota subscript. It is lengthened, we say, from epsilon iota to eta with an iota subscript. The same happens with lu a. It becomes lu a, but it's written with eta iota subscript. Lu almin becomes lu omin. The omicron has lengthened to omega. Lu eta becomes lu eta, second person plural, you, and third person plural, usin becomes osin with omega. Now, you will need to watch out with luo because you're used to luo, meaning I am loosing in the indicative, but it can also be subjunctive. How do you know? Context. Try indicative. Most of the time it will be, but if you see a verb that ends in luo and it looks like it might have an additional word indicating subjunctive, it might be. In fact, it probably is. These endings work also, though, for other tenses. Notice that luso and labo are both aorist stems. Loose are aorist stem, but doesn't mean here I loosed. It simply means I might loose, I would loose, I could loose. The context will determine the translation into English. And notice labo. We have lambano, which could be subjunctive. I might receive, I take, or I might receive, I might take. Both are possible endings, subjunctive. But this is the aorist stem of lambano, lab. Labo, and then place the rest of the endings with it. O, es, a, omen, ete, osen. And you have in the left column the present active subjunctive endings, conjugation of the regular verb. In the middle column, you have the weak aorist subjunctive of a regular verb, luo, lus, o, lus, ace, lus, a, and so on. And on the right, you have the irregular second aorist or strong aorist of lambano, labo, labes, labe. Now, there's also their deponent verbs. We have learned that, well, as you know, the argument is still going on. Is there such a thing as deponency, or are these really middle forms because the subject is involved in the action? I'm not sure we'll ever know for sure, but we do know the endings. Dechomai, I welcome, is in the subjunctive dechomai, 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 the subjunctive, I might welcome, I might receive, depending on the context. I would welcome. Something will tell you, or unless I welcome is also a possibility. As we'll discover when we go to uses especially. But notice in each case, the present stem, dech, and then omai, a, etai, ometha, esthe, ontai. So again, your present tense indicative deponent, meaning middle or passive in the present tense, can be either the initial vowel is lengthened from omai to omai. Omai, a, etai, ometha, estha, ontai. I'm not going to look at all the vocabulary words at the end of chapter 16, V16. Just to mention the ones that look like this, hos on or hos e on. These are typical words that you will see when you have a subjunctive form. Whoever. If you notice hos, who, and on is simply a word, we don't always express it in the English translation. It comes with the subjunctive and it has the sense of ever, whoever. Hos on, hos on might be slightly emphasized, but probably there's no difference really between these two possibilities. You just need to watch out for them. There's one or two more that students tend to look over what are missed, but we'll point them out. Hoton, when it has the subjunctive, it can mean simply when with the indicative, but with the subjunctive, whenever. Notice that we have on again, typical subjunctive. And then there are several other words that are listed in that vocabulary, which I'm not going to go through now because you can do that on your own. You will notice the prepositions. One thing that we need to do, though, where am I? There am I. One thing that we need to do, though, yet is just to get, use some practical examples so we get a little more sense of how to translate these subjunctive forms. So for example, if we go here and I'm going to review using this time, not my slides, but I'm going to use the author's slides. Actually, they're overhead transparencies. Some of you may remember back 20, 30 years ago, or maybe you had them in class. In the West, they've been gone a long time now. Overhead projectors, and you would place a transparency, a piece of clear plastic with writing on it, on a projector, and project these onto the whiteboard or onto the wall. These are transparencies that the author made in previous years. And so I've taken those and also created new PowerPoint slides, in this case to compare the present indicative active with the present subjunctive active, with the indicative with the subjunctive in each case. And you'll notice in each case, the initial vowel in the ending has lengthened from omega to omega. There's nothing to lengthen. Omega doesn't lengthen, but ace, lu ace, the second person singular, it is lengthened to lu ace, the second person singular subjunctive. So when you are reading, looking at a translation, watch out for that lengthening. Notice what your stem is. If you have an aorist stem, you need to notice that, and then notice the ending that's been put with it. Later on, as you read in the Greek New Testament and you get used to it, you won't have to analyze all the time, augment, stem, ending. But as we are beginning a language, we're constantly looking, what is the stem? Is there an augment? What is the ending to the verb in order to get the right information? So luo, as we said, well, it might mean I loose. I am loosing. It might mean I might be loosing. I could be loosing if it is the subjunctive. But there will usually be some flag, some indicator, something that tips you off. This is in the subjunctive. And again, lu, ace becomes in the subjunctive ace. So these endings, you have some new endings here in chapter 16 you need to memorize, but not too many, really. If you just learn to recognize the stem, lu, is it lu? Is it loose? Aorist. Is it lab? Or is it lambano? Is it the aorist stem or the present stem? Men for meno, I remain. But the aorist stem is a mena, irregular, what we call a liquid verb. So for example, I remain, meno. I remained, I stayed. Becomes, because we have an augment, past tense, becomes a main in the aorist. And becomes a with a nu and the alpha ending. Now, if I drop off the augment and take off this ending and start adding subjunctive endings, right away I see, I have an aorist stem with a subjunctive ending. This is an aorist subjunctive. I might remain. But if he had said, I might remain in the present tense, he would probably mean for longer, longer process. And here a probably would mean might remain just briefly, or there could be another meaning. Is looking at the action as a whole in the aorist tense, but usually there's a kind of action, continuous or looking at it as one event, kind of action difference between the present and the aorist. I'm off the subject again. Let's just look at one sentence or two before we close this. Um, we've already talked about the strong aorist endings, and we've already talked about how the subjunctive deponent verbs lengthen. Paru, oh my, paru, oh my, paru, paru etai, paru etai, and so on. And we just talked about the aorist tense of luo. By the way, didn't mention this, but dechomai, if you see the aorist stem dex instead of dech, you still have dech, you still have omai, etai, ometha, esta, ontai. You still have those sets of endings, but you have the aorist stem. So this is an aorist subjunctive deponent. I might welcome. What's the difference between this and dech, omai, in the subjunctive mood, you might ask? Hard to say without knowing the context. It probably will translate both the same until we know. I might welcome, I could welcome. Now, here's one sentence that actually doesn't have a subjunctive, and we might have looked at it in the last chapter, but just review is always helpful. Now, now the God of hope give to you, who mean in the dative, give to you the spirit ta pneuma of all joy, pases, charas, and peace, kai, a, that's supposed to be erenes, I need to correct that, into pistuein, which sounds like in the to believe, but we can't translate infinitives that way into English. It's being used in Greek like a participle, really. So we would translate in believing, in trusting. And here Paul is saying continually trusting, not just one time making some kind of commitment, but continually trusting God in trusting continually. God gives us all joy and peace. Now we're going to come back to this. I'm sorry, I've forgotten. This is on the subject of parsing, and we need to make that the second subject. So let me just go on to, well, I'm going to have to just come out a second and just spontaneously write a sentence for us to close our time with the subjunctive mood. There's a type of sentence we call in Greek a third-class conditional sentence, and no, sorry. This is the way it will begin usually. And I haven't done that right because we don't have a diphthong, so the breathing mark goes over the epsilon. Now this word means if, but it's not a, as we've been used to. On if is used with the subjunctive. And if I put pistu et ete, and I don't have enough room here. So I'm going to have to put the ending on the second line. If you believe. Notice, in this case, I've made what's called a conditional sentence, and conditional sentences are one common place where the subjunctive is used. And it's usually not a, which is used with indicative conditional sentences. We'll meet some of those, we talk about them. It's used with this, what we call third class. It's a conditional sentence. It's one of the 10 main uses of the subjunctive that we will meet. And it simply says, if you, plural, if you believe. And then the sentence would continue, this and this and this will happen. All joy, all peace, in the spirit, for example, are similar verses. Notice that instead of the indicative form, we have the subjunctive form. If you believe, laying down a condition. So in this case, we don't have should or would or could. And often you will need one of those words to translate the subjunctive. But if you have if and the subjunctive, then you won't need one, because if already implies possibility. And the subjunctive is the mood of possibility. More on this in our next videos.